Okay, well, there continues to be more and more mounting evidence that a Nintendo Direct will indeed be taking place next week, and we are going to unpack all of that today because in addition to the very reliable sources like Nate the Hate that we have referenced prior on other videos suggesting that this July Nintendo Direct should be a safe thing to expect at this point, we now have some reports suggesting that Xbox specifically is planning in the upcoming weeks to reveal a large number of ports headed specifically to the Nintendo Switch 2 and PlayStation 5, and this is happening alongside of recent reports like Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment getting raided in Brazil, suggesting that game is going to have a release date and potential marketing ramp up for it very soon. We've talked about the third-party landscape right now and how we have a bunch of second half 2025 games that we know are coming this year, but just straight up don't have release dates. Then we have some other leaks we're going to revisit that now seem more credible in light of all of this talk around the upcoming July Direct. And listen, if you want to wait until the entire thing is confirmed from Nintendo, check back next week. If that happens, we will have, of course, an immediate breaking news video. You'll know from the title that it's confirmed from Nintendo, and that's maybe going to be the video for you, but for everybody that wants to have fun and speculate on what could be there with different leaks and rumors suggesting that we might know about quite a few of the different games that will be in said showcase, this is the video for you. Everybody else, you want the confirmation? Nobody's forcing you to watch this. This isn't the opening scene of Robot Chicken where I'm some mad scientist holding your eyes open saying watch this video. No, you have the power to click on what you want and avoid what you don't want. But anyway, that's my little opening rant. Make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. I'm pretty excited for a July Direct because of course we are fresh in a new Switch 2 generation, and while this has kicked off to a strong start, there is still a lot to be desired for some Nintendo fans. If you're not necessarily a traditional Mario Kart fan or even Donkey Kong, although I would argue you need to give both those games a try if you haven't already. They are just a ton of fun. But I know that there's a lot of people that have not even potentially picked up a Switch 2 yet because they are waiting to see a more strong variety of Nintendo first-party IP make it to Switch 2, and that's hopefully some of what we can expect from this presentation, but also I think largely it's going to be a lot of third-party focus in addition to some updates on existing first-party titles and one or two big things from Nintendo first-party that we don't know about right now, and I will dive into some of my thoughts on that. But we're going to first talk about one of the newest and biggest pieces of information that suggests that this Direct is likely happening as soon as next week when you take this report into account with all of the other sourcing we've seen from sources like Nate the Hate saying they have heard that it's still happening in July. To their knowledge, it is happening this month. The last calendar week it would be Tuesday through Thursday next week. So one of those dates, 29th, 30th, or 31st. Nash Weedle, Attack the Backlog, and a few other sources have chimed in on this over time, but Nate the Hate ranks above everybody else in my personal opinion, and Beat 'em Ups, which we do have to revisit his rumor at some point too, because he said a specific number of games and knew that there was going to be a Direct in July rather. So if this checks out, obviously we want to pay attention to that because a lot of people were not expecting a July Direct to take place because Nintendo normally does it in June. But we have to first hop over to Go Nintendo, where you can see the following headline, which outlines report claims Xbox is expected to announce Switch 2 ports in the coming weeks. Microsoft has shown great interest in the Switch 2 and has pledged to support the platform, but we don't have any concrete plans to look forward to just yet. Apparently that's going to change in the near future. While Microsoft has stayed quiet on specifics, word on the street is that Switch 2 owners will be hearing about some Xbox-related titles coming their way very soon. A new report from the games business claims that Xbox is expected to announce more game ports to other platforms, including Nintendo Switch 2 and PS5, in the coming weeks. Now, alongside that report, and I want to highlight this because this is now spreading on the internet, the official Sea of Thieves account just tweeted out a picture of one of their sailors holding a banana and saying, "Oh, banana." And if you don't think that that's just obviously, you know, that is rare, not the same developers from Donkey Kong back in the day, but Xbox, Nintendo, close working relationship. We know a lot of games are coming to Switch 2. Sea of Thieves makes all the sense in the world as it's one of Microsoft's more live service focused games that gets updates all the time and stuff like that. Obviously, that's going to be headed to Switch 2. And if you don't think this is a direct tease that an announcement is incoming, well, I don't know what to tell you on that. So there's that internal report. Sea of Thieves is tweeting, "Oh, banana," with a picture of a monkey looking at a banana. Pretty clear what's going on there. Nintendo clearly likes third parties to announce big projects like this at their own presentations, as we saw Summer Game Fest hit over the summertime window and the Xbox Game Showcase, and a lot of games that you would expect to see a Switch 2 logo on that we know are capable of coming to Switch 2. We just have not seen that announcement or official support for, and we know that there's going to be a backlog of third-party games that come over first. The Elden Rings of the world and some of these larger titles that have huge player bases. Call of Duty, of course, will come at some point as well. We know that big announcements like that are going to hit and probably come out this holiday season, but we should start to get announcements for a lot of games that are coming out past that. Some of them may be day and date, some of them may be shortly behind the other consoles. Like we recently learned that Borderlands 4 will be launching on October 3rd on the Switch 2, whereas it's coming out like early September on the other consoles. So a few weeks behind. I think a lot of stuff like that is going to happen. Now, Xbox has also interestingly been cited recently in the news for talking about backtracking their $80 price point on games. They once communicated they were going to have their first party premium titles over the holiday season this year launch at $80. Now they're backtracking that to $70, with the Outer Worlds 2 specifically being highlighted. This overall is going to be a good news situation for Switch 2 gamers, because when some of those more premium Microsoft titles do get announced for Switch 2, they're not going to be at an $80 price point. If you have Game Pass, you're probably going to pick it up on Game Pass. If you don't, and you just want to play it on Switch 2, it's nice to not have to worry about that $80 higher price in first-party releases from Xbox for now. I wouldn't expect that to stick around long. They're actually rumored to maybe be launching a brand new console as soon as the end of next year, so that might be when they go for that full $80 punch. But besides that, in prior videos that does also support this argument, we've also mentioned that Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment is now officially rated in Brazil. You don't rate games until they're near finished, and we know that this is a winter title. We don't know anything more than that, and that could even mean early 2026. Now, because this is a later July Direct that would be taking place for Nintendo, we might actually see them throw some 2026 release dates on the calendar at this presentation. I'm actually more split on there maybe not being a mainline traditional Nintendo Direct in September, and we might actually get something like a partner showcase in addition to a big Mario 40th anniversary celebration like we saw them do in 2020 for Mario's 35th anniversary. So there's actually a chance that a handful of first-party Nintendo titles get dated the rest of this year and into early next year at this upcoming July showcase. We also had Nate the Hate also re-clarifying that, to his knowledge, there is still a Direct happening in July, as we've previously cited, and to quickly go through some of the games that might be in this presentation from the original source, really that the first person that was talking about there being a July Direct, and it's not a typical leaker. Beat 'em Ups, the giant Nintendo YouTuber on this platform, put out there he knows there's a Direct. He has a reliable source. Not going to say who the source is. He's just, basically putting out there he just knows there's going to be one this month. And the games that he was told specifically, Metaphor ReFantazio, which I think just look at Atlas and Nintendo Switch, like obviously that's going to come over. I think that it was mainly more of a power issue, and or they wanted to market it as part of the Switch 2. But anyway, on why that couldn't come to Switch 1. But that will be there, apparently, according to the Beat 'em Ups leak. GameCube Shadow Drop of Pokemon Coliseum. I thought that would maybe be at something like a Pokemon Presents. That Pokemon Presents was a lot smaller in nature with no real surprises other than, I guess, the Pokemon Friends app, which is like a puzzle game that you can get on the Switch or on mobile. Anyway, that's going to potentially be there. Death Stranding Director's Cut S, which Death Stranding is on many platforms right now, and it does seem like one of those franchises that would branch out to Switch 2, and potentially we would see the sequel, which is getting great reviews. It's definitely in the Game of the Year conversation for 2025 games. Maybe that comes down the line. The Witcher 3 Nintendo Switch 2 edition, which would be an interesting one for CD Projekt Red to revisit, but they could basically have the updated, more visually advanced version of this game that is on other platforms come over to Nintendo Switch 2. And of course, CD Projekt Red and Nintendo, we know, work well, close hand in hand together. They have over history for things like The Witcher 3 and Cyberpunk 2077, most recently with the Switch 2. And I just think that this is another one of those games that, while you maybe didn't predict it or wouldn't have expected it, it does make sense on paper for CD Projekt Red to do and bring over to the Switch 2 with the Switch 2 edition. Metroid Prime 4 release date, which is the one thing that I think out of this entire list, if the rest of this ends up flopping or not being there, there's no doubt in my mind that we do not learn the Metroid Prime 4 release date at this event. Now, we also had like a recent story gain some traction from Kiwi Talks that we've referenced a few different times, a podcaster on the platform that interviews game developers and has been doing that for years. Clearly, they would have some connections in the industry. They were saying things like the fact that there's a 2025 title, Metroid Prime 4, actually isn't totally finished yet, which I think is a fair statement. It's not just Nintendo sitting on it, like they actually have some final polish to wrap up in this game, and the fact that they're putting 2025 out there means they're targeting this year, but they maybe don't know the exact month that's slotting into yet, or maybe they do, but they have an internal time target that they are aiming for. And you know, listen, at the beginning of the year, we were still talking about job hiring postings and stuff like that from Retro Studios for Metroid Prime 4 specifically, so I do tend to believe this at some level, but I think like the stage that they're probably in with this game now is the very finishing touches before the game goes gold. And you know, we may see a type of day one patch that you often see with games nowadays, but this is largely done. And this also, before we move on to the final game from the beat 'em ups list, is the only last opportunity that I could possibly see for there being a Metroid Prime 2 and 3 port of some sort for the Switch 2. If it's not at this presentation and we learn the release date of Prime 4, but we don't get any confirmation from Prime 2 and 3, well, then I guess Nintendo just skipped over two of the games in the original trilogy, which would definitely be a big miss for the hardcore Metroid fans that want to replay those, such as myself, on modern hardware in the lead up to Switch 2, or in the lead up to Prime 4 on Switch 2. Let's hope that they get those over. A shadow drop announcement similar to that of what they did for Prime 1 would be an excellent way to release those games. And then, of course, probably a physical version would come a week or two after. So I'm hoping that that's a bundle pack that you can pick up at a reasonable price point the day of the Direct. We will see if that happens. It may not. It's not necessarily on the leaked rumored list from anybody, but just logically, this is the last Direct that I think that could possibly show up at. And the one more thing is claimed to be an Isabelle teaser for Animal Crossing with a 2026 title card at the end. Which I do believe makes sense from a business perspective for Nintendo. You look at the success of Animal Crossing New Horizon on the Switch. It may not reach that same level of success on the Switch 2. Newer install base, no pandemic going on, which definitely fueled that game right when it came out. People were looking for daily tasks to do and stuff, and it kind of hit at the perfect time for a lot of people. But nonetheless, I still think that Animal Crossing catapulted to a new level of success in the Switch generation, and we're seeing Nintendo kind of put their biggest sellers in the Switch generation early on in the Switch 2 generation, and I think a teaser for the next Animal Crossing for 2026 does make a lot of sense on paper for it to be the Direct show closer. So we have to wait and see if this ultimately happens, but there's that much more evidence suggesting that it will online, and that's just separate from all of the third-party stuff that Nintendo's already said is coming to the platform. Elden Ring release date will absolutely be there. All these different third-party games we saw showcased over the summer, I think many of them will also be there with release dates. Call of Duty has to be there at some point because that's already a signed legal binding contract. And we even saw Activision Blizzard hiring for a Call of Duty team with Nintendo Switch and Switch 2 knowledge specifically. Back in the day, we covered that back in the lead up to the Switch 2 news. So that's coming over. Maybe it's Black Ops 7. Maybe it's just Warzone for now. Maybe it's Black Ops 6. Who knows? But I do think we're going to start to get that Call of Duty regular release cadence on the Switch 2, and a Direct during the summertime like this would be the perfect place to showcase it. So let me know in the comments down below what your hopes, dreams, and expectations are for this July Nintendo Direct. Do you think it's happening? Are you team on board? There's enough sources reporting things like this now that you're sold on it being likely happening next week at this point. Do you think that sources are wrong on this and we're going to potentially be silent from Nintendo in terms of big first party news until something like August? Do you think that there's a Direct happening, but it's just going to be a partner presentation and not a mainline Direct? Because to be fair, that is an option on the table. And finally, what games that we know about or don't know about that you're hoping hit this year in 2025 are you most excited to potentially play on your Switch 2? So make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn your notification bell. And with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.